Hey everyone! Rogue Core and Starseeker have both launched recently into early access, and they both had some pretty rough launches. Their communities are pretty mixed on their respective games, but to be honest with you, a lot of the reviews and community discourse that I've read about the games seems to be stuff like, like lacks of content or like broken gameplay systems and bugs and people just getting bored really quickly. And it's made me realize something that I think that people are forgetting that these games are early access, or they don't have the right expectations for what a game in early access is, right? So I kind of just want to share my 2 cents on why I feel like the early access label kind of seems to go under the radar, uh, like in the current day, right? And why it's being interpreted in a bunch of different ways. Because I think that it's an important discussion to have, especially around these two games. Mainly also because the communities of both these games have kind of just like, I'm not gonna say like they've gone crazy, but like it's definitely been a lot more hostile than I was expecting, especially with Rogue Core. But I think it's important to ground ourselves and remind ourselves that, hey, at the end of the day, what we're playing is an early access title, right? So I just want to talk about that. There's no script for this video. I just have some talking points in front of me, and I'm just gonna get right into it. Let's get right into the meat and potatoes here. I do think it's important to remember that, like for context, both of these games are spin-offs, so they're not direct sequels, and I do think that does matter, right? Rogue Core is not DRG2, and Starseeker is not Astroneer 2. Some of the discussion I saw about these games, and this is more of a small point I just kind of want to get through real quick, but I've seen some people basically being like, well, these games aren't the other games I'm used to. I was expecting the other games I'm used to, right? And I feel like that's a little disingenuous, especially with the whole purpose of Starseeker and Rogue Core being total genre swaps, right? Starseeker is what if Astroneer was an extraction MMO type of always online game, right? Where everyone's working together. And Rogue Core is literally what if Deep Rock Galactic was a roguelike and followed a different progression system and whatnot, right? So I just wanted to get that out there real quick, that the people who say that, like, who kind of fail to understand these are spin-offs really just rubs me the wrong way. And it goes a step further, especially for like Starseeker, because I mean, yeah, even Rogue Core too, right? Because let's start with Rogue Core's specific thing that I'm going to talk about here. Like for Rogue Core, you had people basically saying that they wanted the reason why we got assault pace changes, like the timer adjustments in the latest update, was because people were complaining about the timer. The reason why people were complaining about the timer was because they went into Rogue Core expecting DRG and didn't get the DRG's timing out of Rogue Core. Rogue Core is designed to be fast-paced and rushing, where DRG is more slow-paced, take it at your own pace, chill, right? You just do things in missions, you go and explore. They follow very different gameplay styles, and I don't think everybody realized that. And especially like when these games were being marketed, or when Rogue Core was being marketed, I'll talk about Starseeker in a second, you had people basically going, well, why is, like, people would look at it and they'd see like all the cool trailer shots and stuff, and they'd go, oh, that's so cool, but then they get in game, right, and then they're like, why am I suddenly having to go a million miles an hour? And it's, I think, a fundamental problem of just not understanding that that's the secret sauce, right? Like, that's what makes the game work for me, is the timer. Because you had people who were like, get rid of the timer. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I don't mean that in a harsh way, by the way. I'm just saying that, like, it's really interesting to me to see that kind of sentiment echoed through a surprisingly large number of people when, like, if you've played other roguelikes, like, biggest example I can think of, right? Risk of Rain 2. The timer is everything in that game. If you're not collecting items at a set, like if you're not getting enough items per minute, you're gonna lose. That's how, and like that's how Risk of Rain is played, right? So it's weird. I don't know. That sentiment that these games need to be exactly like their originals bothers me. It's very weird. And I feel like it's important for us to remember before I kind of dig into the more specifically about other early access specific things, that these are spin-off games, and that is okay. I'm very glad that Ghost Ship and System Era are trying completely brand new things instead of just, well, here's another update for our old game, you know, like, I'm glad they're trying new things. I think this kind of change is really good. It's really fun. I like both games, you know. I think that the decision to make them spin-offs was a good idea. So, a couple other things I can think of real quick. Rogue Core had a year-long closed alpha. More on that later. And then Starseeker had an open beta and a network test. And it's important to also know for both of those that the content presented at launch was basically not really that much different than what we had either in the closed alpha or the network test, right? I think that is important because, you know, like for me, personally, I was expecting a little more from Starseeker on launch, but to be fair, I did see some new gadgets, like there's an air cannon now. What's that? There's a brand new variant of the shock lasso. There's a bouncy terrain mod. Like there is new things. So I can't say like, oh, they literally added no content. So, you know, but I do think it's important to keep in mind as well, because I think that may have also tainted some people's reviews. More on content specific stuff a little later though. And then I guess the other thing as well, I kind of said this with the spinoff thing, but I think you had people that were just confused marketing wise on what either game even was at launch. And I think in Rogue Core sense, I feel like that was just the case of people just not reading. Like, the game is very open on the Steam store page of saying it's a roguelike experience, right? It plays different than DRG. You know, you watch some gameplay and it's fundamentally different, right? And then for Starseeker, I do see that, like, Starseeker surprised me personally with what it was. So I do think that there is maybe something to be said about the marketing on Starseeker could have been improved a little later. We'll talk about DLC for Starseeker later, by the way, but I just want to get that out there that I think the confusion as well has not really helped people understand what these games were, and it may have led to some mismatched expectations. That's really why I'm saying that. So then, the early access label, right? Why does it seem like Starseeker and Rogue Core both got the short end of the stick? Why does it seem like people are treating these games like they should be fully feature-fledged like games, right? Like fully finished, you know? Despite having the early access label. It comes down to a couple of things I can think of. The first thing I can really think of, though, is that not every early access launch is equal. And one of the best games I can think of to explain that is Slay the Spire 2. If you've played it recently, I think you could argue that it is a fully fledged package, right? Excuse me. It's got like a it's got a fully fledged, fully realized gameplay loop. There's tons of new items from the original game. There's tons of new tons of new cards. There's new characters to play as, new artifacts, tons and tons of new events. I should mention I haven't played Slay the Spire 2 yet. I do want to at some point. But I'm just getting this from like my friend who I've like watched play and calls quite a bit. And it looks great. There's a whole like online multiplayer mode. That wasn't in the original. To my knowledge, you had to have a mod for that, right? So I think that's a big deal, right? For that game to be labeled as early access kind of makes Rogue Core and Starseeker in a weird, like, puts them in a weird spot, right? Because with Slay the Spire 2, I feel like you can make the argument it's basically a fully ready to go video game but they're going to continue to add content up to a 1.0 release. So honestly, to me, it doesn't really feel as much of an early access. Not the same with Rogue Core and Starseeker, though. Like, for instance, like, to be honest with you, I think Starseeker is as early access as you can get, if I'm being completely honest. There is a lot that needs to be done to make Starseeker really flesh itself out and give itself more of its own identity and stuff. You know, we're having the community event right now, and there's all kinds of feedback flooding in on that community event, on gameplay systems, items, the gameplay loop itself, how people are interacting with each other. To me, that is what early access should be, because it should be, hey, here's this broken game that we're working on. You can pay to get in early to, you know, give us your feedback and help shape the game. And you understand, like, you understand that you will be, like, testing basically a broken product for us and giving us feedback, and you get to play it early. That's the point of early access, right? Rogue Core has gotten a lot better after its update 1, I'll say, you know. Tons of new upgrades, a lot of upgrade reworks to make things more fun. The game is too easy, if I'm being honest, but that maybe that's a topic for another video. It's not really relevant to what I'm doing here. But yeah, like, I just think it's very interesting because, especially, like, if I think about other games that went into early access, I mean, even like the original Astroneer, right? The original Astroneer, like, it had content, yes, but it was a pre-alpha state. It was super buggy. I think the fact that it was a completely brand new thing, you know, meant that people didn't really care about whether it was broken or not. And they were offering it for, like, what, $20? Maybe even less at the time. Because I remember playing during those pre-alpha days. So here in Starseeker, when you know, I do think price has a good bit to do with this as well, with, like, the dissatisfaction of these games, because both games are being charged at $30. And right now, I can't confidently say that either of them are necessarily worth that price tag, unless they look cool to you, right? And that's okay. I think that that's actually fine, because they are early access, right? The idea is that you pay now, and we as devs make it better later, right? And of course, obviously, part of the reason why people get skeptical about that whole thing is because there has been other early access titles in the past that have kind of backfired, or maybe people paid for it expecting it to get updated and, you know, become a fully fledged product, but then something goes through wrong, or the devs just bail, and then it's like, well, crap, now we have this broken game that it never actually made it out of early access, and we feel scammed, right? Early access is a gamble, and I think it's important to recognize that it's a gamble that you take when you buy a game that is early access. If you don't want to take that gamble, you should wait till the game fully comes out, right? So, or like a little later down the line, you know, that's what reviews are for. That's what, with, you know, that kind of stuff. And kind of online with that, again, I think it's important to also just remember that, you know, early access titles, don't expect a full game. Expect broken stuff. Expect whatever, right? Sometimes I think we forget that because we get excited by the vision and excited by what we think the game could be. And so we kind of put, you know, our expectations naturally grow, because of course we do that as humans, right? Our expectations naturally grow and grow and grow. If we don't tamper those and go into a new early access title thinking, okay, I got to remember it's early access, right? And then it's kind of like, well, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, right? And I think that tendency to forget that a game is early access and what that really means for most games, I think that's part of why the early access label just doesn't really hold any weight anymore. But you also got to remember, right? Part of that reason why the early access label doesn't hold any weight is because, why it doesn't hold any weight is because it means something different for every game. Like I said with Slay the Spire 2, right? But what I'm really getting at with this is it also means that different developers have different ideas of what early access means, and the same thing is true of the players. Players won't look at early access the same way, which is why I think that these games are so mixed right now, and why you see a lot of the kind of mixed, you see people talking about these games in a very mixed way. Some people really like them, some people really don't like them. I think it's the understanding, coming into the middle, right, and understanding where your expectations are is really important when it comes to these kinds of titles. Something else I want to talk about real quick as well was the fact that Rogue Core and Starseeker both had supporter pack DLCs on day one. Now then, in my humble opinion, I think that this isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, I think they should have waited a little bit before jumping these in. And there's a reason why I say that. Especially in the case of Starseeker, but I want to talk about Rogue Core first, so we'll get to that in a second. But for Rogue Core, you know, you had people already being like, why is the game priced at $30 when Deep Rock was 20, right? So people are already being price conscious, and that's just the world we live in right now, where people are being very, very stingy with their money, rightfully so. And that's a good thing, by the way. You know, be money smart. I'm not saying don't be money smart. Be money smart, for sure. But point is, people are already kind of sensitive to the fact that it's $30. Then you're asking $10 for a supporter pack. What I think what Rogue Core did right here, though, was making sure that it was $10, but making sure that it was marketed as a supporter pack. I think this is somewhere where Starseeker kind of got wrong. I think Starseeker didn't do a good enough job of explaining that it was meant to be a supporter pack. And the whole reason why I'm even talking about like this, really, to be honest with you, because most people, like, no one on the Rogue Core side really seemed to care, but people on the Starseeker side seem to definitely care, because again, you're pricing a game like this at $30, promising more content later, and then you're also on top of that asking $10 for a engineering pack. They didn't call it a supporting pack in game. Or like a supporter pack in game. It was the engineer pack. What we saw as Starseeker players, and what I think happened for most people, is they saw the tweet a couple days before launch, basically saying, hey, there will be no microtransactions. You'll be able to get every single cosmetic, and every is the key word there, cosmetic, just through playing the game, right? Suddenly, to then open the game, go to the Exo store, look at it, and the very first thing, and it's the biggest thing on that screen, is an optional cosmetic pack. It priced at $9, and on top of that, it's like it shows you the price tag, and your first gut reaction to seeing that has to be, why is there a paid DLC in my game if the devs said no microtransactions, right? Now the devs have, like, especially Adam, who's basically the father of Astroneer. Adam has come out publicly saying, like, in his blog or whatever, basically saying, like, that was a huge mistake. We meant it to be like a supporter pack. And to be fair, in game, you can't actually unlock anything, right? You can't. There are no microtransactions in game. That's what I'm trying to say. Because it takes you to the Steam store outside of the game, so it's not actually a quote-unquote in-game microtransaction, even though it's being advertised pretty loudly in-game. And to Adam's credit, he didn't say that about, like, all the whatever. All Adam basically said was, it was a mistake. We didn't mean for people to realize. We thought people would realize this is a supporter pack. You know, we didn't market it well enough, right? That's what he said, basically. I think, you know, what they should have done is they should have probably just, I think there's two things to this. One is, I think they should have done a better job marketing the supporter pack to be an actual supporter pack. Very much like Rogue Core, because I think Rogue Core did a very good job of doing that by straight up literally calling it a supporter pack. But they kind of forgot to do that for Starseeker. And then also, or I think if they hadn't called it the engineering pack, and if instead they had literally said, supporter in some way, or even just in-game, having the third tab on the Exo Store be called supporter packs probably wouldn't have made people as mad. And then if you hadn't advertised the supporter pack front and center, right? I get it, you want people to buy the supporter pack, but the thing about stuff like supporter packs is people will buy them if they want to support you. You don't need to do as much advertising. So if anyone from System Era is seeing this, you really don't need to do a ton of advertising to get people to buy the supporter pack. If they like the cosmetics, and if they want to support the company, they'll do it. You don't put it front and center on your thing, especially like on your store, especially after saying, hey, no microtransactions in game, right? And to be fair, yes, there are no microtransactions in game. You are correct. But you gave everyone the wrong impression. That's what I'm really trying to get out here. And sorry for that being kind of rambly about the DLCs thing, but I feel like it's important to bring up here because I think everything I've kind of talked about here and the lessons that these developers are learning, like Ghost Ship and System Era are learning, right? And the journey that we're currently going on with these games, I think all of this is very indicative of, again, an early access title, right? And the fact that I think people just still aren't really... You need to meet it in the middle and recognize that it's early access, right? And recognize that things are broken and recognize that, we make mistakes, right? We're all human. Let's be real. So, I guess as I wrap up this video, I want to talk about how you, yes, you, can... What should you do, right? Like, what should we do to... When a new game releases and it has that early access tag, where should your expectation level be? Like, what should you expect, right? Because especially if you're going to buy a game, I feel like you should try and arm yourself with as much knowledge about the game before you buy it, right? So, at least to me, I think that one of the best things you can do is to just lower your expectations by default. When you see the early access tag, expect not much. Expect very little content. Expect broken stuff, bugs, glitches, crashing. Expect things to just break, right? Expect the game to maybe not have as much content, because the point of most early access titles is to build upon what's here. And as we go further and further into early access, to add more and more and more to the game until eventually we can sell it as a fully fledged product, right? I feel like that's the idea that most devs want you to take away, but unfortunately it kind of gets lost in translation sometimes, right? The second thing I'll suggest is that I think it's important to recognize that there is a baseline expectation for how much content an early access game should have at launch, but you have to be careful with defining where that line is, both as a developer and as like a player, right? Because especially in the case of Starseeker is a little more content light right now, but I know that they're going to be adding more stuff later. If you don't manage where your baseline expectation is for an early access title, you will inevitably become disappointed, right? So keep it low enough to where you won't be disappointed, but also not so low that you aren't expecting a game to have anything. Because for instance, you have some people who are like, I don't even want Starseeker. It looks stupid, right? Like, it looks like this game has nothing for me. Because on that sense, it's more of like, and I'm talking more so about people who would probably like Starseeker but are writing it off just because they don't think that they would, purely just because of their expectation is actually too low, right? It can't be too low, it can't be too high. It's a balancing act. You have to have real conversations with yourself and kind of be vulnerable with yourself and talk to yourself about, like, what do I think this game is going to offer? What would I be okay with? What would I not be okay with? Where should my expectation level like lie at. Because the reality is that most games won't just have no content, right? Like, it's not like you're going to get bored after 10 minutes in most titles, unless you specifically are buying a game that probably isn't for you in the first place, right? That's kind of, or if it, like, because like to say that Starseeker is like so bad that no one's playing it right now, it's just not true. There are people playing it. There's a community event going on right now. People are contributing to the community event. I won't lie, the community event is boring. Probably more on that in another video or whatever, but I've also shared my own personal feedback about that in the Discord. Again, maybe that'll be another video. I don't know. But I think it's important to, you know, just keep a baseline expectation. Keep yourself in check. Don't go too high. Don't go too low. That's all I'm saying. And the last thing I really want to say here, for like you to like keep in mind, game developers don't work on things in a linear sense. And this is especially important with Rogue Core. Rogue Core is a game that had a closed alpha. The point of the closed alpha was to get the game to be stable, not break 24/7, and like, and when I mean break 24/7, like I know there's some bugs and crashing right now in early access. It used to be so much worse. The game used to crash at basically nothing. Like it was really bad, right? But that was the point of the closed alpha. The whole point of that whole section was, yes, to gather feedback from closed alpha playtesters, but also to get the game into a shippable state so then the greater community can come in and give their 2 cents on it, and then Ghost Ship can take a look at that feedback, the whole collective feedback, and make moves based off of that, right? And then work on things, prioritize what needs prioritizing. The reason why I bring this up in the first place is especially because, and this was brought to my attention through a Lazy Maybe video, but there were people who were basically being like, wow, the closed alpha playtesters didn't give any feedback and were a bunch of yes men. No, we were not. That's really, like, that actually kind of ticked me off when I heard that from Lazy Maybe's video. Because I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? No, we didn't do that. We gave so much feedback. We were talking about weapons. We were talking about the upgrades, like, stuff. We were literally talking about the timer, ammo, enhancements, like, the ramrod, everything. We talked about it all. And the greatest thing is that during that experimental phase, they literally took the alpha channels and rebranded them so you can literally go in and see what we were talking about during the closed alpha. Now, you can't now because they closed them again, but I'm sure when there's another experimental for an update, you'll be able to go back in there and look and see all the things we were talking about at closed alpha. Because they literally just rebranded the Discord channels for that. So, the point is that I know Ghost Ship is listening and that they're taking note of all this feedback, but they have so much to work on when it comes to Rogue Core that they have to pick and choose things to work on, right? And the reason why I know that's the case is because during closed alpha, I'm pretty sure I was the reason why we got the audio ducking button for Omega. Like, whenever, like, it'll, like, lower the volume of some of the gameplay sounds and the music whenever Omega's talking, right? There's an option that you can tick off to remove that ducking feature. I asked for that during the closed alpha. Something else I know for a fact I probably influenced was stuff like the boomstick, the warthog, and the Cadna shield projector. I asked for those things to get buffs and, you know, feel better to shoot and stuff. The Cadna got literally the change I was hoping for the most. It now has faster projectiles, and the warthog got a rate of fire change, and the boomstick, and some other nice tweaks with that one. And the boomstick got a pretty big rework to where it feels punchy again. It doesn't have as big of a spread. It's not as upgrade dependent. The point I'm making here is that they do listen. Ghost Ship is listening. System Era is listening to the feedback that we give. It's just that game dev takes time, right? So they are going to work on what they need to work on when they need to work on it. And I think it's important to remember that and keep that, you know, keep that in the back of your mind, that it's not that they're not listening, it's not whatever, because I know for a fact that they are, and that you just need to give them some time, keep the feedback coming, keep the constructive feedback coming, you know, but just remember that during these early access games, devs have so much on their plate to work on because they are still very early into the development process for most of their games. So, yeah. I think that's really it. I think that's all I necessarily wanted to say. I did not realize this video was going to take half an hour. I kind of just got passionate and really started riffing off on my notes here. I want to give a shout out to Ghost Ship Games and System Era both. I want to say that both of them have actually handled feedback for the games pretty well. And they did a really good job of sticking through the rough launches, like especially on Starseeker's side, getting everything fixed and working and stuff. I know there's been some issues with the Nintendo Switch 2, like verification and whatnot, but that's more of a Nintendo issue, not whatever. They're doing a great job of keeping us up to date on those issues and getting them resolved and whatnot. On Ghost Ship's side, Update 1 is fantastic. Again, it's makes the game a little too easy for me, but I know that that's something that will probably get fixed next patch, right? I'm sure we'll get some extra difficulty somehow. I'm sure they will find ways to make the game harder, you know? So, I think that's it. I think that's all I really want to talk about. Thanks again to Ghost Ship and System Era. You guys have made some really cool games. I know not everybody is into Starseeker or Rogue Core, but I really like them both, and I really wanted to make this video just to kind of give my 2 cents on why I think just people just not... I need people to be a little more critically thinking. I don't know how else to put that. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. That's all I have for this one. Bye-bye.